Ava wrestles with her anger versus the logic of what he's saying and eventually decides that he's right, but she's still concerned about where Sammy's loyalties lie and if they can actually trust her. There are still a lot of questions if Sammy broke all of those things or not. Al reminds Ava that Sammy's singular loyalties lie with him, but he also doesn't hesitate to say that her version of him is largely idealized version she's built up in her head. Again, no mention of the fact that they haven't seen each other in a decade. Hello and welcome to Precontation Points Video Snark. If you came here because you thought that this was an audiobook, please stick around and maybe learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. I read books, discuss what went wrong, and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read-through of the Color Theory series by Ashley Bustamante. Not the first video, go check out the others, links are posted below. Chapter 9. White magic is combined magic, and there has to be accessible knowledge on it somewhere. She says this knowing full well the extreme lengths people like Celine went to in order to hide how they literally slaughtered mentalists. Ava thinks about the hidden knowledge, but she also knows that benefactors know how to create white magic. She decides that since she's unlikely to find an actual book about it in the library, she needs to learn dream magic so that she can get into the mind of benefactors. She goes to Elm's private space when he's not there, but he comes in a second later. Ava says that she simply wanted to see him, but Elm isn't stupid. He knows that she's hiding a book behind her back. As soon as he realizes what it is, he gets upset, which leads to her becoming a whiny brat over the entire thing, which in turn makes Elm spell out that literally every single mentalist learns dream magic last because of how dangerous that it is. It's not something to be taken lightly or self-learned without great harm to the individual. He says that she can read the book, but makes her swear that she won't attempt to do it without him present, which is a good compromise. But Ava tells the readers that she's lying to him when she agrees, which makes me want to beat my head against a brick wall for a little bit. Chapter 10. Later, Ava goes to tell Sammy that she's to report for kitchen duty. Sammy's hanging out with Elm and insists that the work she's doing is more important than helping to cook dinner, but Elm is quick to chart her over the fact that she's skipping her chores. Ava only wants to know what could possibly be more important than dinner, and Elm says that they were going to come to her soon. Sammy explains that before she managed to get through the barrier, she was on the opposite side of Magnus, on the other side of where Violet City is, that there's a large compound over there and the benefactors all seem to hang out there. Naturally, Ava starts thinking about how they can get over there to investigate this when they only have 2 invisibility devices left, which, why hasn't Elm been focusing on creating more? Is he worried about another sabotage? They might be okay for food for now, but eventually they will need to go get more, and that'll require the devices. Elm offers up a counter solution to going across Magnus to leave the area completely. It'll take longer, but it might be a bit safer. It's obviously Sammy's idea since she's the one who was living outside. Sammy says that she was studying the barrier for a long time and there are periods when it gets weaker in certain areas, that there's a predictable pattern to this weakening and the next period is in 2 days. Elm then sends Sammy to the kitchen. She goes, but huffs and puffs about it as she's leaving. Once alone, Elm uses the same logic Ava previously used on her. We can't leave the rest of the group without somebody to protect them. It makes sense for Elm to go considering that he's a powerful mentalist. Plus, it's not exactly like Sammy and Eva are on good terms, which is something Elm acknowledges, and puts a large chunk of the blame exactly where it belongs, which is directly on Sammy. Ava wrestles with her anger versus the logic of what he's saying and eventually decides that he's right, but she's still concerned about where Sammy's loyalties lie and if they can actually trust her. There are still a lot of questions if Sammy broke all of those things or not. Al reminds Ava that Sammy's singular loyalties lie with him, but he also doesn't hesitate to say that her version of him is largely idealized version she's built up in her head. Again, no mention of the fact that they haven't seen each other in a decade. 2 days later, Blake and Eva go with Elm and Sammy to see them off. Eva feels weird about saying goodbye to him and wishes that she'd been a little nicer to him for the past 2 days. They hug for so long that Blake has to remind them that they're out in the open and benefactors are a thing that exist. Sammy taps the barrier with the staff and then pulls Elm through. Eva walks forward, but she feels the buzz of power like always. She can still see them, but can't hear what Elm tries to tell her, so Eva and Blake watches Elm and Sammy disappear into the brush. Chapter 11. When Elm is gone, Ava hates every bit of his magic that's left in the cave. She wishes that the lights provided some heat because she's tired of being in the dam. She then wonders if she can use mind control magic over herself and tries to make it so that she's in the sunlight. But then it gets too hot and she turns her magic off. Her arms are unburnt, which surprises her. Blake comes over and freely says what's on everybody's mind about Sammy. Ava senses that there's more to what he has to say, so she encourages him to spit it out. He asks if she can really trust Elm and has the audacity to compare him to Jace. And I'm not saying that Elm is 100% trustworthy, but what I am saying is that it's terrible to compare Elm to Jace. After all, Jace was an adult who literally kidnapped and held Elm prisoner. Elm was a literal child when all of that went down. He was held prisoner and tortured for close to a decade. Blake expresses his worry for Ava, and yeah, there's all that stuff, but I'm mainly focused on how Blake says that Ava is like a sister to him. Thank you so much for this. You cannot begin to understand exactly how many books that I've seen with love triangles, and as if those aren't bad enough, the rejected man has a tendency to turn into a raging incel. And I've read an alarming number of books where there's an attempted rape or molestation or something. The bar is literally set at don't molest women who reject you, and some of these authors bring their backhoe. And before anybody goes the route of those are adult romance novels, I'd like to remind you that Jacob Black forced himself onto Bella Swan. She broke her hand trying to slap him, and he laughed at her. It happens way more in young adult novels than people like to think, or at least delude themselves into thinking that books aimed at children are somehow safe from that. In a lot of ways, presenting rape culture in novels aimed at 16-year-olds somehow makes it worse. Anyway, since Elm is gone, Ava decides to study dream magic, which she does in the gem cave. Elm has it hidden from the other students with the idea that they might find that much power to be irresistible. Since Elm is gone, Ava is the only one who knows about the area, and it's the perfect study spot. The steps laid out in the book are fairly straightforward. First, you need to lucid dream. That is to say, you need to be aware that you are dreaming. Then you need to emotionally find your way to the person in question, somebody that you've previously touched. Thinking about all of the almost motherly touches Celine had given Ava fills her with rage. Literally every single thing about their relationship had been parasitic and toxic. Ava decides that she's studied the book so much she practically has it memorized, so it's time to put it to the test. Step 1 is to obviously fall asleep. But as Ava lays on the ground, she can't stop thinking about how Elm and Sammy are alone, and it's not so much that she doesn't trust Elm, but the two of them are alone. Ava decides to stop, since doing magic while she's that distracted and angry is always a recipe for disaster. She gets up to leave, but feels weird. As she kneels down by the pool to splash water on her face, Elm steps up from the water and asks what she's been doing since he left. It's then that Ava realizes with surprise that she's dreaming and looks around for the portal that'll take her to the dream world. In there, she finds a bunch of swirling portals, which are all of the people that she's had physical contact with, but no way to know which is which. She carefully puts her hand near the first one and has memories of Blake. As she pulls away, she worries that if she touches Elm's portal, he'll know what she's been up to. After a bit of trial and error, Ava manages to find the portal into Celine's mind and goes in. Celine is dreaming about prison school, and Ava watches as a version of herself goes walking down a wibbly hallway. By the time Dream Ava reaches Celine's office, she's regressed to being 5 years old. Celine asks a child why she always has to ruin everything, to which child Ava responds that it's what Celine deserves. Celine then slashes the dream Ava until she disappears. This is obviously quite upsetting to the real Ava, and her upset draws the attention of Celine. Ava tries to run, but since this is a dream, her legs move, but she herself doesn't go forward. Ava wills herself to wake up, and when she does, she finds herself back in the gem cave. Her arms are slashed up. She heals herself a little, but knows that she's going to have to go to Jazz for further help. She finds some of the group hanging out in the common area like it's simply another ordinary day. Jazz is shocked to see the slices on her arms, and Ava tells a lie about how she fell. Jazz is working on her arms when a couple of screams ring out. Everybody goes running, and they find Nikki and Sarah in hysterics over a prone Blake who is bleeding from a head wound. Jazz and Ava get to work to heal him. There are two things immediately known to Ava. Sammy couldn't have done this since she's not there, but most importantly, they need to find out who did this and fast, because this has now escalated to hurting people. Chapter 12. Later, Blake lies in bed and insists that he's fine thanks to Jez and Ava patching him up. Ava is obviously worried about long-term repercussions, but he keeps insisting. He also doesn't remember what happened. He said that he was going to the common area 1 minute and waking up to Jez and Ava healing him the next. He says that with things escalating to actually hurt people, he wants to give the mixed magic a try again, that Ava was onto something, but since she didn't know what she was doing, obviously people got a little hurt. However, more hurt than the hands is Ava's ego. She doesn't want anybody to be injured like that. Blake keeps insisting until Ava relents and agrees to partner up with him. Later, Blake and Ava are on kitchen duty together. Elm had created a massive black cauldron for cooking in simply because of the aesthetic of it all, but as you can imagine, it's heavy and unwieldy, especially when it's full of water. Blake wants to practice creating green magic simply to create a bucket so they can better carry the water. He describes the kind of bucket that they should make, and Ava focuses really hard on creating it. Ava's surprised when there's a little green light from where their hands are clasped, and even more surprised to see the bucket exactly as she'd pictured it. But that surprise quickly gives way to disappointment when they both realize it is nothing more than an illusion. She thinks that her untrained yellow magic is the block in the exercise, but Blake says that it's good her illusions are getting better. Nikki comes in and says that she wants to help out with dinner even though it's not her day to cook. As they get started, Nikki says that Blake told her that Ava was trying to experiment with mixing different magics again and she wants in. Ava is kind of upset but agrees that Nikki can also be in on their experiments, but to tell nobody else since it's still dangerous. Thanks for listening to my Book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book snarks, always free and updated every morning. The only edit to Patreon is to become a member without paying. You'll get access to the same things on Tumblr, but on Patreon. Supporters can have access to so many more book snarks starting at $1 a month. Also new is a 1-week free Patreon trail, so be sure to check that out. Special thanks to Dawn, Phoebe, and Nikki for supporting me on Patreon already. Also, a huge shout out to Bunker Bash for making a sizable one-time donation. Thanks! If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my snarks so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is. But not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just $10 per chapter. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of spicy short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!